Hello and good afternoon. I am Jamie Buckland with the West Virginia FEW, Families United for Education. And I am joined today by our good friend, Junius Johnson. And we are going to talk some more about how Junius partners with parents and students in the pursuit of what is good, true, and beautiful. And so, Junius, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. So it's been about a year since our audience at large was introduced to your work. So give us a refresher in who you serve these days. You've got a couple different online programs. So who is it that Junius is serving these days?
So there's three main constituents in the educational process. There are the students, there are the parents, and there are the teachers. And sometimes the parents and the teachers are the same. And in the ideal situation, the parents and the teachers are all also students. And so everyone's learning together. So what it means to be a teacher, whether you are a professional teacher or a homeschooling parent, is to be one who's been down the road that the student needs to go down and has come back with news of what lies ahead. So my ambition is to be able to serve all of those types of learners wherever they are in their learning journey. So I do want to teach the young children directly and be able to engage them directly with what I do. But I also want to teach parents and teachers, the adults, and help them to connect with the wonder and the joy of knowledge in their heart, out of which a good teacher needs to teach. It's one of the things that we've learned from all of our studying and thinking about education through the years is that the main thing that gets students excited about a subject matter is the teacher's excitement for the subject matter. And so I'm very interested in helping adults reconnect to that place of excitement so they have that available to them to then infect their students with.
That's a big task. So now I want to ask, how do you do that? So what are some of the nuts and bolts of the programming that you've created to help that process?
Yeah, so think about something like literature, stories. We all love stories. Humans are hardwired to love stories. But particular stories can be easier or harder for us to interact with. Everyone's got books that they love, and everyone's got books they don't care for very much. And many of the books that I don't care for, it's no comment on how good or bad the books are themselves. They just don't really connect to me, the type of person that I am. I'm always after a place where I can grab hold of you, whatever age you are, by your heart. If I can set your heart on fire and get your passions inflamed, then it will be easier to take you to the places that you want to go to see the sights you want to see. The climb up the mountain is long and arduous, but if you are just absolutely set on fire and thrilled to find out what you're going to see from the top of that mountain, you will tackle that. Not only will you have the tenacity to tackle that long climb, it won't even feel as arduous or long to you because you'll be so eager to get to the top and see what you can see from there. So all of my programming tries to come at the educational process from the standpoint of how can I open your heart first? And if your heart is opened up in that sort of a way, in that expansive, joy-filled way, then I know we can go to really rigorous places with your mind as well. I've just published a book recently called On Teaching Fairy Stories, in which I try to lay out some of my philosophy of teaching and why I think fantastical stories are particularly well suited to the educational task. So my own programming tends to focus on let's read stories that have dragons in them. Let's read stories that have fairies in them. Let's read stories that take us beyond what we're going to encounter in our everyday non-story lives, because I think that those types of stories are really concentrated encounters with the same types of responses we will need to give in our everyday lives. The courage required to face a dragon is not entirely different than the courage required to get out of bed some mornings or to face work or to face chores or whatever that may be. But it may be easier to learn that courage from facing a dragon because it's a bit removed from our everyday lives and because it's concentrated, and so we can see what it looks like a bit more clearly.
And be reminded that you're glad once it's done. And
Yes.
I think that I shared this. You were a presenter for our virtual conference there a couple weeks ago, and I shared this with the audience that as a true extrovert, I have an aversion to sitting down and reading that I really wrestle with because I have to
Mm,
stop doing all these things. And so I about a decade ago realized that it was the physical act of reading was kind of tough for me, but I
mm,
always liked to have read whatever
yeah.
it was. And it was that end result. I like to know things. I wanted to experience the story. And so I could convince myself. And I love that you're bringing that connection to it, that kind of forming that moral imagination, if you
Mm.
will,
Well,
and fostering that.
and this is a really important piece of what you're saying, that the goal of reading doesn't end in having read the book. Reading ends in conversation about the book,
That's
right? And
right.
so to create spaces where children can come together with their peers, with their friends, and talk about the book together and share their ideas and what they liked and what they didn't understand and whatnot, and just stand shoulder to shoulder and admire something together and point out the contours of something together. That is as vital for we adults as it is for children, because we have fewer built-in spaces in our lives to have those kinds of conversations, particularly around books, right? And so a course is not just, I love introducing people to new favorite books. That is one of my favorite things to do. But the point of teaching for me is, now that we've all read the book, let's sit down together and let's see where this conversation is going to take us.
Right. So let's talk about what you have in store for the 23-24 year. I know you're offering a couple of courses. So what's on the menu for this year?
There's a very exciting course I'm teaching for the first time this fall for middle and high schoolers, called Close Reading Fantastical Literature. And the idea is, I want to improve their critical reading skills, their close reading skills. But I want to do so by reading these types of works that I've talked about that have these fantastical elements. So I've drawn works from within the literary tradition, things like Horace Walpole's Castle of Otranto, which opens up as this sort of wicked lord is walking through his castle, and he's walking through the courtyard of a castle, and this giant helmet just falls out of the sky and crushes him to death. And that's how the story begins. And you're thinking, what's going on? How did this even happen? Those types of stories. We have some things taken from deep in the depths of the tradition, but also some more contemporary stories that are incredibly well done and that will connect thematically to some of the more traditional stories that we're reading. So that'll be running this fall semester for middle and high school students. And then I could not be more excited to say that in the spring, I'll be offering my courses on C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia. One course for children ages 8 to 14, and one course for ages 15 and over. So that means that the adults and the high schoolers will be in class together, which is a really fruitful time of discussion around these books. And we'll spend 2 weeks on each book, going very deeply and asking some very deep and hard questions, reconsidering how we react to a lot of the characters. That is our reaction to Eustace when we first meet him in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. Is that the reaction we're intended to have, or are we giving in to something a little Eustace-like in us when we hate him for the way he behaves at the beginning of that book? To think about the questions of slavery in that same book, where one of the Narnian lords is participating in the slave trade. And what do we do
Right.
with that? And how do we think about those types of things? So
Right.
we'll be asking especially in the older class, we'll be asking very adult questions about the books, but we'll also just be delighting in the details of what's going on there. And the younger course will be, again, practicing those skills of reading closely, reading carefully, following along. And I'll be asking them much more personal questions, not so much the larger philosophical questions about slavery and whatnot, but rather personal questions about, how is Aslan calling to you as you read this book? And how are you going to respond to that? How are you going to be a king or queen of Narnia in your family this week, among your friends, and in your
Yeah.
larger culture?
Yeah, I love that. And we're excited to be partnering with providers like you. We have just launched our provider programming to help you get signed up to participate with the Hope Scholarship Program. We have a list of 40 providers. Junius is one of them that we are going to be working with over this next month to ensure that those of you in West Virginia who have Hope Scholars are going to be able to use your Hope dollars to participate. So very excited to actually have this up and running with a few right now. We are checking people off of our list as we get them added. So Junius, I'll be in touch over this next week to get you in there. And then once that is up and running, you'll be able to go in and see these courses that are available through this programming and be able to use your funds towards that. Junius, thank you so much for visiting with us today. We appreciate the work that you are doing, and we're excited to hear back. I know some families that have participated previously, so we're excited to get to hear from those this next year that participate in what you've got going on for 23-24. So thanks so much for being with us today, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.